Now, let's have a look at today's big announcement from Treasurer Jim Chalmers on the merger crackdown. Chalmers is giving sweeping new powers to the competition regulator to decide which takeovers and mergers can go through and which will be rejected. Under the new rules, the competition watchdog, the ACCC, will be able to detect and block what it views as anti-competitive mergers and acquisitions. Here was the Treasurer today.
What we want to do is we want to look at mergers which have the potential to substantially lessen competition, but over time that might have a creeping impact. And so what we want to do is to strengthen the ACCC's hand when it comes to looking at troubling mergers.
Already, though, this evening, the Fin Review is reporting that the plans could kill off the startup sector. Well, here to break it down for us is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. Great to see you as always, Ross.
Sharri, no problems.
Look, what's your analysis of this new major change, giving the ACCC quite extraordinary powers? Is it a good idea?
Yeah, well, it is, but just backtrack to Australia itself. Remember, we're a country of about 26, 27 million people. We're spread out all over the place, and we are really the land of the great duopoly. Even now, there might be 3 big supermarkets there, 4 including Metcash and RGA, go to 2 major airlines. Rex sits on the side as well as a smaller one. But you go to pharmacies, there's a couple of really big players. You go to a whole lot of areas and you see 2 or 3 big players just about everywhere. Banks, 4 big banks, right? So you get this sense that there is market pressure pretty much everywhere, concentration. So the idea for the ACCC is it has to review any takeover or merger that's of a certain size. That's part of these laws that Jim Chalmers is bringing in, which is good. But Gina Cass-Gottlieb, who is the chair of the ACCC, who's been there for 2 years.
You interviewed her this afternoon.
I interviewed her this afternoon, and she has been consistently calling for more powers. And the reason for it is that she is often blindsided as to when takeovers and mergers occur. Effectively, the deal is done before it's even brought to the ACCC. So this is a big shake-up that means that anybody who wants a merger or a takeover basically has to engage the ACCC much earlier. So just have a listen to Gina Cass-Gottlieb when I spoke to her this afternoon.
We welcome the set of merger reforms the Treasurer has announced, Ross. We think that they will better enable us to see the mergers that matter and also to be able to prevent those that are going to be anti-competitive.
There's a couple of questions from this, Ross. Firstly is already the criticism that it could kill off the startup sector. But secondly, there's a reason that M&A proposals are kept top secret until a decision has been made.
Yes.
And this could change the structure of how that all operates if you have to start engaging with the ACCC and get, extra teams involved.
Well, that's right. But at some point you would have to engage with them anyway. Now, but there's a couple of takeovers I want to take you to. One is really quite classic, and that's, strangely, in the pet industry. Now, there's a company called Petstock, and Petstock basically had Woolworths as a major shareholder. Woolworths decided it wanted to take 55% of Petstock. But Petstock, in the meantime, been gobbling up all these other small pet operations and it gained a massive market share. The ACCC didn't even know it was doing this. So by the time that Woolworths came along and effectively said, hey, we're going to take control of this, it meant that Woolworths would have had significant control of the pet supplies industry in Australia. So they did the deal with a court enforcement to basically force Petstock, Woolworths, to sell 41 stores to make certain they weren't completely dominant in all these areas. So that's one example. The second example, which is interesting, because here the ACCC got beaten, and that was when the ANZ wanted to take over Suncorp, the banking operations of the Queensland bank and insurance giant. Now, that was held up for 12 months. So the real issue that you point out about as well, any merger or takeover, it's timely. It needs to happen quickly. So if you're waiting for 12 months or 18 months for decisions and inquiries, all that type of thing, it's not good for Australia. So in this particular situation, there has to be at least an interim decision from the ACCC within 30 days. And then if there needs to be further inquiries, they can go on and ultimately into court. So, but you do recognise...
Which makes sense, because you can't imagine the bureaucracy working past 5 p.m, let alone midnight or 1 a.m. like the teams at Macquarie do.
But think about markets moving and the fact that while you're actually having an investigation, the markets are moved, the takeover might not make sense anymore. So this is all a part and parcel of the reason why you need to have a very efficient monitoring system for takeovers so you don't have concentrated powers in places you didn't expect. But at the same time, you need to have swift sort of decision making to ensure that these deals do go through if they are going to.
Yeah. Now, the lead up to the budget next month in May, there's a lot of talk about tax reform or the lack thereof. Piece in the Fin Review today by John Keogh. He says that Jim Chalmers and his predecessor Josh Frydenberg, while they were savvy communicators, he says, and I'm quoting now, they've appeared less interested in rocking the boat on tax reform and more focused on preserving power to pave the way to the Lodge to fulfil their prime ministerial ambitions. So this comparison between treasurers of the past who have been highly ambitious and what we're seeing now, I don't know if I agree with that comparison. What do you think?
Well, it's funny because when the changes to the stage 3 tax cuts came in, I interviewed Jim Chalmers at that stage and basically said to him, over the course of about 8 to 10 years, it's going to cost an extra $25 billion. But I said, listen, by the time that money actually hits the budget, you're going to be the Prime Minister. You're going to be the one who has to deal with this, right? So don't imagine...
Did he laugh or how did he react?
There's a little laugh, keeps on going. Yeah. But the reality is that tax reform is not just tinkering at the edges with these tax scales. That's a part of it. But it's actually going to the very heart of changing the way in which Australia goes. That's how we get productivity. That's how we can hold interest rates down. That's how Australia generally does better. Look, I'll throw one little example at you that I've got in my head, and I've had it for a long time. Why does a person who pays PAYG wages, a person who just every day turns up, pays their taxes, why do they have to put in a tax form? Well, why?
Good point.
Why? Why don't, instead of them putting in a tax form,
thank you
why don't you
for
basically
that great idea.
Right, number 2, why don't we have work-related expenses? Why don't we just take them all out? And everybody just does it. Nobody has to put in a tax form. Now, if you want to negatively gear a property, you put your tax form. If you're a business, put in a tax form. If you're an ordinary PAYG taxpayer with $200 worth of expenses, don't bother.
I tell you what, Ross, that is the best tax reform idea I have ever heard, not actually having to fill out forms for your taxes because the money comes out of your pocket anyway.
Precisely.
It's such a good idea.
By the way, give those people some money. So give them a bit of cost of living relief and make their lives a bit easier. So there's little things like that that are never thought about that would actually change people's lives and make them happier and maybe actually make them like the government a bit more as well. So, as I say, tax reform takes all... That's one small example. But there's so many other ways about trying to even up the playing field to make certain that people basically feel as though they're getting more bang for their buck and that when they work, they're not actually working for the tax office and the government. They feel as though they're keeping a bit more of it themselves.
Yeah. All right. We're out of time, Ross Greenwood. Thank you so much.
No problems at all.